Good evening from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's the 22nd of May 2025, almost halfway through the year. Where does the time go? Who knows? The current time in Brisbane is 7:36 p.m. and I've had a lovely day. I replaced a mirror in my brass porthole that I keep out my front door to deflect evil away from my Sacred Space house and garden, and I haven't had a mirror in it for many months because I struggled to find a mirror that would fit it. And last week I bought it actually. I've been sitting on it for about a week because I bought it when I was out with my friend Jared. And it's actually a mirror base that you sit candles on top, but it was the perfect size. So the first thing I did this morning when I woke up was I thought, today I'm going to install that mirror back in my porthole and put it back out there at the front door, and it's going to look lovely, which I thought would be a simple task, am I right? Well, I went to get the plastic insert that holds the mirror in place, and it gets screwed down with 6 little tiny screws, which I had assiduously kept aside months ago, when the last mirror got so rotten you couldn't see in it anymore. And I thought, oh well, I'll put the screws aside and I'll use them again when I replace the mirror, not realising that it was going to take so long to find a mirror to fit it exactly. Well, I go to my laundry and I couldn't find the screws. So, crisis. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I had a whole bunch of small screws. They're not quite as small as the original ones, but they were a bit longer. But what am I going to do? They fit inside the fitting, but they were just too tall. So I got my bolt cutters out, chopped the ends off them, made them fit. So that was quite a task, bolt cutting screws first thing in the morning. My cleaning lady arrived, Rati. She said, what are you doing, Tanya? I'm renovating my brass porthole. Okay, Tanya. I said, you don't understand, Rati. I've worked like a demon for days. I showed her the little gold embellishments that I made from my calf. I said, I worked on those all day yesterday, melting the gold and then, putting them in the shot plate and smashing them with a hammer. She's looking at me, And I said, then I had to saw them out, and now I'm waiting to solder them on. She said, I don't think you should do that, Tanya. It looks lovely just the way it is. It's perfect the way it is. All you need to do is set the stone. Well, I had existential angst because I'd spent a whole day yesterday making those little gold embellishments, which I really do want to solder a few butterflies on it and amongst the garden, because it's a floral design. Now I've got existential angst, like maybe she's got a point, maybe it'll be overkill, too much, maybe I'll have trouble soldering them and ruin the bracelet. So now I'm freaking out if it's like just too much and made life too difficult for myself. But I've worked on the bracelet this far, so I want to at least solder one little butterfly on it, if not, 2 or 3. Oh. So anyway, she likes it plain and I like things opulent. I've always been that way, Look, even got the glitter lipstick on tonight because I thought, let's be opulent tonight. Let's be opulent, babies. Anyway, I'm very happy about my bracelet, but I didn't work on it today because I did the porthole at the front door instead, and by the time I cut all the screws down to size and screwed the mirror in, then I had a crisis because the mirror was perfectly round, but it must have been just on one edge, just a tiny fraction bigger. So then I thought it didn't quite fit, and it's very, very difficult to grind down glass, mirror or glass. So I had a crisis about that, but I went out and I got one of these little tiny little miniature rasp thingies, a round one. I don't know what you call them, out of my toolkit, and I wet it because you've got to do it wet, otherwise the bits of glass fly everywhere and you breathe it in. I probably should have been wearing a mask, quite frankly, to be honest, but I made sure it was wet. And then I just very carefully ground little divots where the 2 screw holes are, where it just wouldn't quite sit right, and made it work. I'm so bloody proud of myself that I made that mirror work, because I've been looking for one for, it must be nearly, can't even remember when it must be at least 6 months I've been looking for a mirror. So it's back up, it's all bolted back in on the wall and it looks fabulous. I'm so proud of myself. All these little jobs that I would not have known how to do or even thought about doing many years ago, because I didn't do silversmithing and I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the trust in my abilities to do these little things. Oh, and then after I bolted my mirror in, my 2 tools that I bought from Lion Punch Forge arrived. So I was very happy about that. They arrived, and I'll be buying some more tools from that gentleman, Chris Anderson. The next thing I wanted, the titanium tweezers and the bracelet mandrel. And I'd also like to buy the tool that makes paperclip links. Probably don't really need that in theory, but it'd be nice to have. So there's a few of his wonderful tools that I still want to acquire. I'll just buy bit by bit what I can afford when I can afford it. So things are happening at Sacred Space. I've got my mirror back up and my new tools arrived. I was so excited. I really was excited, like a little kid. I love buying jewellery tools. The odd thing is I love buying the tools more sometimes than doing the actual jewellery. You see me hunkered over, all excited. Anyway, then I'd made an arrangement to visit my friend Lynn today. So I drove to Capella, but I said, I've got to go to Bunnings first. But on my way out to the car, I noticed that my transponder on my car wasn't really responding, and I have a phobia of that breaking down and not being able to get in and out of my car, being stuck somewhere. It happened to me once before, which I don't understand why when I think about it, because the key still unlocks. But anyway, I was stuck that time. But that can never happen again. Can't be stuck anywhere in the middle of nowhere, especially when I go dancing at night. It'd be dangerous, and it wouldn't feel safe anyway, even if it's not dangerous. So I thought, well, I wanted to buy cinder blocks, or they call them Besser blocks here, to lift my jewellery bench up, because yesterday working on the little gold embellishments, which was intricate work because they were tiny and it was very difficult sawing them out, holding on with just the tip of my forefinger and then sawing with my jewel saw. Oh, there was a lot of swearing and cursing went on there, but I did it. I sawed out 3. I've got 2 more to do. And because I was hunched over and my bench is actually too low, it should be a certain height for a jeweler's bench. I just used an old school desk, So I made do with what I had. It's what I do. I make do with what I've got. I don't always spend a lot of money on expensive tools if I, those are real luxury items for me. So I make do with what I've got, turn shit to spiritual gold. So, because I can't afford a fancy jeweller's bench, they're like $2,000 and they're smaller, and I feel very confined working on them. I like my desk that I've got that I call a bench, but I've got to lift it up higher so I'm not, hurting my neck when I work. So I said to Lynn, I'll be a bit late. I'm going to go to Bunnings first, buy the cinder blocks. Wow, by the gods. They don't help you in Bunnings anymore. They just stand there nattering to other people, and I'm standing there like a shag on a rock. Wanted to know where, because it's a different Bunnings, it was down at Kapalaba, where they keep the cinder blocks, which was out in the timber yard. Then I couldn't find the timber yard. I didn't could find anyone to tell me where that was. So anyway, eventually I did find someone who worked it out. And an older gentleman, my vintage, walked me practically, which was sweet of him, to where the cinder blocks or besso blocks were. I bought 5. I think that'll be enough to lift the desk up higher. And then I wanted to buy shellac, but I couldn't see any shellac on the shelves. I don't even know what it really looks like, what I'm buying. And so I went into overwhelm, got very bloody confused. So I ended up buying a very expensive wax because I've decided instead of varnishing, my jeweler's bench just keeps getting wrecked by pickle and bicarbonate of soda that you use to neutralise the pickle and stain to buggery. So the next job I'll probably do tomorrow is I want to sand it back, and instead of varnishing, which I've been doing but doesn't really work because it's not really waterproof varnish. They said you can use marine grade varnish which soaks in, which would work great, but I know when I used marine grade varnish on my mosaic table I made, it stunk for days. I can't have that with the little birdies that share that room, that space. The fumes would kill them. So I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to get around that? Because I would prefer to varnish it in marine grade varnish, but fumes, toxic fumes, people it is. So I bought the special wax, which means I'll be waxing it every 3 to 6 months. But I think that's a lesser evil, at least until, because the birds are going to be with me, for hopefully many, many years, keep them healthy and alive. So the other thing I could do is take the jeweler's bench down under the house, varnish it in marine grade varnish, and just leave it under there for a few weeks till the smell dissipates. But then I can't use it, so it's a problem, isn't it? So I decided to buy this wax anyway, and I think the wax won't be too fumey, although it did say to wash your hands after using it and use gloves, so kind of a bit worried about it off-gassing and being poisonous for the birds too. But I think it won't be as poisonous or toxic as the marine varnishes, because I remember how badly that smelled when I did my little table, is what I'm saying. You can tell I'm tired on meandering around. So anyway, and I bought 2 batteries to go in my key transponders for my car. The one I use every day and the spare, because I figured the spare will be dead, and sure enough it was. So I've replaced those. That was a bit of a task sitting in the car, didn't have the right tools. I had to use a pair of little scissors, but fortunately I had in my little car toolkit. And so I messed about with those in the car park of Bunnings for ages, trying to get those put in. It's not a simple task. Should be simple as, but the way it's designed, it's quite bloody complicated. Anyway, after faffing about with that for about half an hour, eventually got to Lynn's place. And I've not long been home, and I'm very tired, but I've been tired every day, and the reason why I'm so tired is all the stress of trying to achieve all these little jobbies around the house, like my gold embellishment making yesterday, and today working on my brass porthole, and still tired from all the work I've done leading up to the last 4 or 5 days, or really a week. So anyway, but I come home, I've covered over the birds and closed their door, and I think they were quite happy to see I've come home, probably wondering where I was actually. And I worried about them. Birds need to be covered over at night and kept feeling safe and comfortable, and closed the blinds, and so they're all snuggled in for the night now. And I thought, well, the house is so quiet and I'm all alone. I could have gone dancing tonight because the Mike Beale band is playing at the Brooklyn Standard, and I really liked him. Bishop, he's a wonderful man. Him and his wife are so supportive to me on Facebook. I'd like to support them by going and dancing for his band that he's playing in now, but I'm a bit tired, people of Earth. So I'll save it for another time, and maybe if I'm not too tired tomorrow night, I'll go out and dance for Ramjet. So, well, when I say dance for them, I'm also dancing for myself, and I'm dancing for the gods, but you know what I mean. There's certain bands I like to dance for and with and support because they've been kind to me over the years. So, you know, it's what friends do, support each other, and it's a symbiotic gift that goes both ways, because dancing is healing energy for me, and other dancers and musicians feel appreciated with their gift of music, and you know, it's a feedback loop. But anyway, I could still go. It's 8 o'clock, but they start at 9. No, I won't push it. I'll read to you, people of Earth. Continue reading Man, Myth and Magic, Volume 1. And we're up to Africa. And the title says, You are useless, you gods. Wow. There are times in our lives when we feel like the gods turn their back on us and aren't supporting us, and have been capricious and cruel. But I try not to tell the gods that they're useless, because they drag me through by the hair of my crying chinny chin chin and gift me immensely, and in many, many ways. And yes, gratitude and mindfulness and being at peace within one's own body, mind and spirit, and when you can, dancing are all gifts, honorifics to the gods. So the left hand photo I just showed you briefly is a Christian cross bearer in procession during the Queen's visit to the Sudan in 1965, which was the year I was born, so we're talking 60 years ago. There are over 68 million Christians in Africa. So let's just have a look at his headdress again. I'm interested in his headdress because see how it covers his eyes? It's a kind of style headdress that shamans wear. The idea is that not being able to see and have visual distractions helps you tune into the gods or the ancestors that love us, or the spirit helpers that come to assist shaman. So I'm interested in that. I see it's got a big cross on top of it, and he's holding up a very large cross as well. So, and the fringe looks like they're all little tiny bells, sort of cone shaped. Can you see it? It's hard to see on my laptop. But anyway, it's interesting embellishments. Babies. I realised last night I could buy, it would be expensive, but I could buy some gold wire, 1mm, and make posts, solder gold posts on the back of those little butterflies, and then I'd have tiny little 9-carat gold studs that I'd made myself. That would be cool too, wouldn't it? But it's a lot of work. But I might do it one day. But it's a lot of work. Everything's on the other side of work. Work, 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 work and work. And buying gold. But I've got 5 pieces and 2 are matching, so maybe I could put the 2 matching ones aside for that project that I might do one day. With the little matching butterfly studs to go with the bracelet with the little gold butterflies on that. I have it all matching. Wouldn't that be quirky and artistic? Anyway, it's just amazing what pops into my head late at night. I was like, oh yeah, I've got the ability to do that now. I've got the skills. All I need is the gold wire, and I'd have to buy the little butterfly clips that go in the back of the studs, I suppose. Probably is a way of making them too. But let's not faff about, I just buy those. Anyway, I'm on a new journey because I haven't worked with gold before. So it's a little bit exciting, inspiring, motivating. Anyway, right, the picture on the right says, if I can pronounce it correctly, cicatrization. I would call that scarifying, but I guess scarifying is more scar tissue and long lengths of tissue. But anyway, cicatrization. Cutting the skin with a sharp implement to produce raised scars is practiced by various African peoples, partly for beauty and partly for religious and magical purposes connected with initiation, pregnancy, or love. Well, this Nuba woman from the southern Sudan was first scarred when she was 7 or 8. Well, it wouldn't have been for love and it wouldn't have been for pregnancy, so it must have been a religious practice. But it is very beautiful. I mean, let me try and get my camera. There we go. Focus. She's we won't just stare at her nipples, people of Earth, because that's TMI. She's a very attractive young woman, and yes, you can see it crisscrosses across her chest and across her belly, and they don't show lower down, but I would assume it's probably done across the thighs as well, possibly. I don't know, it might just stop at the belly and the chest. Is it on her face as well? Looks like it's on the top of her head. So, what is that hair? It's hard to tell. Anyway, whatever it is, ouch, bloody ouch, but it's a traditional spiritual religious practice, so it's acceptable in her culture. Yes, there's a few on her arm as well. You can just make them out here on the left hand, which would be her right hand, her right arm. Stupid laptop camera. If I ever get my new iPhone and can make my videos on that again, we'll resolve this issue completely. I am due for a new iPhone, but I'm trying to remain debt free. I only just got debt free and I like it. Feels freeing, not having to owe money to Optus or Apple or whoever the hell you buy your phone through. It's all very expensive. Debt-free people, not owing anyone anything, not even my time. It's very liberating. I had spirits at me for the last 2 years. Get out of debt, Tanya Aarons. We want you free. And I'm finally there. I mean, I've been spending a fair bit of money on luxuries like those wonderful tools I bought. But they're things that I will be using all the time, so they were necessary. And I'm happy about it, but I don't have any debts. For the first time in decades, I've worked hard to be very cautious with my small amount of money that comes in. And I'm very excited about that. Of course, I don't own my own home. I don't own. My car's getting older. There's things that why is that an event? There's things that I lack, but at the moment I'm fairly bloody contented, really. Everything I have, I've paid for with my own money and I've achieved on my own terms, and I'm grateful for that, actually. Right, above left. These figures stand outside a shrine of the god of thunder in western Nigeria. I'll just show that to you. They all look like people, don't they? Amazing. Each one is a little individual. Let's get this camera to focus. Come on, you can do it. It's not going to do it, is it? So annoying. Sometimes if I hold it still for a while. Right. Yeah. And the picture above is typically arid landscape in the Sudan. The Sudanese are known for being very tall people. The Africans' reliance on nature for water, food, and all the necessities of life is the basis of nature worship, the most significant aspect of African paganism, found in many different forms all over the continent. And here they're all sort of just sitting next to some kind of holes they've dug. Don't know what the holes are for. And the title says, surrounded from birth by all the wonders and terrors of nature, primitive man discovered objects of reverence and fear all around him. Anyway, I'll just show you this picture of these Sudanese men and boys sitting next to these round holes. I wonder what the holes are for. Capturing water, maybe? Doesn't say, it just says that they're in harmony with nature, which is, the best way to be as a human being, regardless of culture or creed or, country you live in. Right, let us begin reading about Africa. Africa is a continent of many gods, pagan, Mohammedan and Christian, of spirits, magic, witchcraft and prophecy. This article gives the background for later entries dealing with individual tribes and customs. My tea's bloody gone cold, but never mind. continent of Africa contains some 6,000 different tribes. So complex are African languages, races, cultures and religions that anthropologists cannot yet agree about many of the facts that are available to them. It follows that where there are so many sorts of men, there are many gods or concepts of God, and many religious sects with their peculiar rites, magical practices, and traditional myths. Some idea of the enormous diversity involved can be seen by comparing the Egyptian Copt, a tall, fair-skinned Christian, with the Bushmen of southern Africa, a stunted, black-skinned pagan. Both are Africans, and both are typical in their way of African racial types, cultural groups, and religious beliefs. But there are certain basic concepts which underlie all African religions. And these concepts, far from being the mumbo-jumbo popularly associated with medicine men, witch doctors, black magic, fetishes, jujus, and the rest of it, are still a powerful spiritual and social force. Paganism, gods of nature. To most Africans, God, in one of his many manifestations, or called by one of his many names, there are over 200 principal epithets, ranging from the everlasting one of the forest to he who roars so loud that the nations are struck with terror, is an ever-present being, and his priests, medicine men and witch doctors are recognized leaders of the tribal community. Estimates give the number of non-Christians and non-Muslims in Africa as, now bear in mind this was written in 1970, 151,031,000, or over half the total population. In earlier times, before the true character of African traditional beliefs was understood, these people were simply called heathens. They were poor, benighted savages who bowed down to wood and stone. The more accurate term used today is pagans, from the Latin paganus, a word which originally meant a peasant or countryman. The African pagan, like the pagan everywhere for that matter, believes in a polytheistic system in which a chief god presides over lesser deities, rather as a king ruled over his domain in ancient times. Nearly all African cults had their supreme being, called by 100 different names which vary from tribe to tribe. But no matter what the chief god is called, he is invariably conceived of as the maker of the world, the master of human destiny, an omnipotent and omnipresent King of kings and Lord of lords. And under the rule of the Supreme Being are all the lesser godlings, each with his special function. The question that has puzzled observers since white men first arrived in Africa is whether the Supreme Being, whatever his name, is an abstract idea, a sort of creative energy which animates and pervades the universe, but has no direct relationship with man, or whether this God is a personal being, like the Jehovah of the Hebrews, or the Our Father of the Christians. 'Tis perhaps typical of the difficulties inherent in the study of African religion that no native has come forward to clarify the question, and that white men can only make their observations from the outside, with no help at all from written scriptures, texts, or recorded ecclesiastical history. Yet all observers who have managed to make contact with pagan Africans agree that the idea of a supreme being, though vague, is universal, even among the most primitive of peoples. Like the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, it is also clear that the worship of the Supreme Being is, on the whole, a lackadaisical affair. The Creator of the universe is, after all, bound to be somewhat indifferent to a mere human and his problems. On the other hand, the lesser gods, the spirits of the earth, and the ghosts of departed heroes are thought to be much more sympathetic. They can be flattered, wheedled, and even threatened. A not unusual African prayer will go as follows: You are useless, you gods. You give us only trouble. You are a bunch of so-and-sos. What do we get from you? Nothing. I kind of have to laugh because, you know, when you're at your wit's end and you're at the 11th hour and all seems lost. I once said to my friend Lynn, who used to be a more devout Christian, although she's kind of let that slide in the last 20 years or so, but I once said to her, you know, Lynn, I'm a terrible blasphemer. I feel really ashamed and guilty. She said, why? I said, sometimes when, you know, things are really bad, like when I've been strangled, or when I lost everything, I would just throw a tantrum at God. And I said, maybe that's why I'm cursed with such a difficult life, because I've blasphemed against God. Maybe I brought this on myself. You know, the Judeo-Christian gaslighting and guilt-tripping that we've all been indoctrinated into. It is what it is, people of Earth. I used to go through terrible anxieties over that. I've let that slide too, because I realised it's a big, big universe, people of Earth. God is bigger and better and far more amazing than all of those petty anthropomorphic ideologies worked into our religions. Just saying. But anyway, Lynn would look at me wisely and she said, I think throwing a temper tantrum and yelling at God is probably just what you needed to do as stress release, number one. And number two, she said, I don't think God would be terribly offended by that, even though technically it's blasphemy. Why? I said, Lynn. She said, it's a pretty firm, staunch exercise in faith. If you didn't believe in God anymore, you wouldn't be yelling at him and saying, why have you turned your back on me and left me literally to die in this constant state of difficulty and misery and ill health and poverty, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, I'm very grateful to her wise words because it got me through, stopped me overly focusing on this invisible being that the creator of all that is, was and ever shall be. It made me start to focus on my own self-determination, sorting my own shit out and getting my own life to work out. And it was a long, slow, arduous process because I kept being beset by evil and rotten people who were awful and destructive. But all through that, I had a few core friends like Lynn and her husband Peter, my friend Jared and Sally and a few other people throughout my life, Margaret and Lynn in New Zealand. And I had a few core few people that I could literally count on one hand, see me through this life and remind me when things got really, really terrible, which there were too many really, really, really life-threatening, terrible times. Don't worry, Tanya, they would say. You have the strength and the faith to get yourself through, and God in his strange ways does have your back. And I would throw my hands up in despair and say it's too little and it's too late and I'm not going to get through this and it's one more disaster, it's one more hurdle, it's one more thing, and they would just remind me. Just see it through and wait. And 60 years I've been living like that. It's a long time, 60 years, fighting my way through, sometimes quite alone and single-handedly too. But you never know. You never know when you think you're alone, who's watching, listening in the higher realms, and who shows you in miraculous ways how much you are loved and how much you are wanted and needed here on this planet, this current time, space-time. And it's often been a very humbling, very emotionally kind of ontological shock at times to see that and witness it, and the miracles that were performed for me and through me, and the generosity of beautiful friends who got me through when things were very, very fraught. And here I am at 60 buying tools for my silversmithing hobby and aspiring to learn more and more and improve my skills and maybe one day have a business again. That's a long time view, and I'm 60. I might not live long enough to manifest that, but we can't know these things for sure. So I'm just continuously working towards that goal, even though it seems an impossibility. And either way, it sparks joy making lovely things. And the gods, the Holy One and all manifestations, blesses me with enough. Today I was gifted clothes again through my friend Lynn and her daughters. So I'm blessed as much as I have been cursed, and it swings and roundabouts sometimes. It's a bit odd at times, but I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for all that is, was and ever shall be. Showing me potentiates that 10 years ago I would not have thought were possible at all. I would not have even aspired to them because I was that destroyed by the evil that had been surrounding me. So I've overcome it in my own quiet little temper tantrum stomping, moshing ways. Anyway, so where were we? This is evident that this personalised relationship with the deity is not confined to African pagans. Christians, in particular Roman Catholics, often approach God through such intermediaries as the Virgin, the Apostles, local saints, martyrs and others. And in the Muslim religion, Muhammad and his fellow prophets, including Jesus Christ, are the buffers, as it were, between humble man and Almighty God. The African, surrounded from birth by all the wonders and terrors of nature, logically pays more heed to sun, rain, storms, rivers and animals than we do, as these objects are his immediate friends or enemies. From the dawn of time, primitive man discovered objects of reverence and fear all around him. The former had to be thanked, the latter placated. This was the origin of all religious activity and remains the cardinal principle of African paganism. And if we remember that, in the beginning, men noticed that their enemies, crocodiles, snakes, lions, and the like, were quiescent once they had caught and devoured their prey, we can begin to understand the origin of human sacrifice. Such sacrifices were common throughout the continent of Africa until quite recently, and nobody knows the extent to which they are still practiced today. Nature worship, then, is perhaps the most significant aspect of African paganism, and it is found in 100 different forms throughout the continent. We are familiar with it in the animal gods of ancient Egypt, and among those gods, the crocodile and serpent were accorded special veneration. They still are in parts of Africa. It is difficult for Western man, with his inbuilt horror of snakes, to understand the African's attitude, yet our obsessions about reptiles are perhaps more illogical and less scientific than primitive man's regard for these lowly creatures. After all, there are more beneficent, I should say, got there in the end, serpents than maleficent, and we often kill our friends in our ignorance. The African is more cautious in his approach, and instead of indiscriminately killing all snakes, whether poisonous or not, he tries to placate the snake spirit itself. Python worship, for instance, is characteristic of several West and East African tribes. Less than 100 years ago, travellers described the Python temples, where these snakes were fed, watered, venerated, and even danced to. The Python god was given many wives who brought food and water to him and made him comfortable with grass mats and a decorated house. In return, his spirit watched over the tribe and, in the person of the priest, forewarned the community of dangers, accidents, and the like. The penalty for killing a python was death by burning. And in 1864, the explorer Sir Richard Burton, not to be confused with the actor that married Liz Taylor, by the way, saw a python killer burnt alive in his hut, from which he escaped only to be clubbed to death by priests. So they really meant business. Like, really, really meant it. But astonishing, isn't it, people were? Well, I know when I had Sybil Serpent come and live with me for 12 days while she or he, I assumed it was female, was shedding her skin. It was an amazing encounter, actually. I began to really develop a deep love for her. I mean, I wouldn't want her climbing over me or slithering around my neck or anything, but we had a really good, solid friendship for about 8 days after I got over the initial shock that she was living near my back door and wasn't inclined to go away anytime soon. And then in May she arrived on Halloween, actually, in the afternoon. I discovered her on Halloween, 31st of October, but I don't know if it was the same carpet python or a different one, had found its way into my bathroom through a hole above the shower stall, and had coiled around my shower rod, and that was quite a shock too. But when I came in, screamed at it in kind of horror, because my first encounter with a python inside my house, inside my tiny bathroom, when I screamed with like surprise, it slithered right back down where it come from. So that was actually big mana, people of Earth, big mojo, because the snake represents sexual energy. It also represents regeneration and healing and so many spiritual meanings behind it that I was like really sitting up and taking notice, actually. Anyway, and then when Sybil arrived on Halloween, I was like, okay, the universe is trying to tell me something here. Be ready for anything, psychedelic dreamer. Anyway, she lived with me in perfect harmonic resonance for 12 days, and then she shed her skin and disappeared. I haven't seen her again. However, she may return when it's time to shed again, because she seemed to have an understanding with me that she was safe here in my sacred space garden, and that I would indeed protect her when she was most vulnerable and in pain, trying to shed a very constrictive, tight, painful skin. And even when workmen arrived and I said, don't go near her, I don't want her frightened or disturbed, they were laughing at me, like really quite amazed at me. And I was like, well, she's my snake now. She's living here in my garden and she's not leaving anytime soon. I'm not totally thrilled about that concept, but don't want anyone to hurt her. And you know what? She sort of slithered out into the garden, looked at me. She understood, non-verbally, that I was her protector and guardian for those 12 days. So I'm quite convinced she'll come back. You know, animals know when they've been treated with kindness and protected just as much as, people do. Right, anyway, where were we? Another fundamental fact of African paganism is the firm belief in life after death. No one dies from natural causes in any case. He ceases to live because he has been interfered with, perhaps by human enemies, perhaps by evil spirits. Hence, when he passes over, this does not mean that he has gone for good, but to the contrary, he continues to take part in the communal life, now in his spirit form. And you actually see that when I have conversations with that former enemy, ex-lover of mine, David Davidson, pop in sometimes when I'm making my videos and start talking to me. He's certainly trying to take part in, maybe not my communal life, but in my still very much wanting to engage with me long after his death. He died in 22nd of May 2016. So there's just one example of how if there's unfinished business and they've got to make amends or set right what they did to fucking destroy me when he was alive, by the way, he can't move on in peace till he's achieved that goal. But that's what that's what he's told me in the past, and I actually kind of believe that. He owes me big time for the damage he wrought. Cost me my daughter's estrangements, family discord, loss of homes, loss of my rightful inheritance, all that viciousness he participated in with my former mother, dead mother now, and of course in those days she was still alive, and with her last husband, all that viciousness, all that collusion. Those bastards owe me big time. But they're dead in the spirit world. What can they actually do to undo all the damage they perpetrated against me? Sweet fuck all, actually. But he pops in and jabbers at me and tells me that he's got my back. It's all very sweet, really, isn't it? Bottom line, though, is I'm having to fight through this life alone and find my own path and make my own way and make jewellery and maybe down the track take up other artistic pursuits, thinking about, taking up painting maybe. And I have done a little bit of painting, but not much, not in a professional, commercialised aspect. And anyway, whatever, I've got to make it on my own is what I'm saying. Every time I think I've fallen in love with someone, they turn out to be cruel, sadistic, so I know I can't rely on other humans, particular human men, for support. So, apart from my close, platonic, sweet friends, spirits can jabber and badger me all they like, but they can't undo what was done. And the rest is kind of up to me, and it's a heavy burden and a responsibility, especially at 60 when my health is still kind of precarious, but every day and every way I'm building back my beautiful life with the support and eternal love of the Holy One and all manifestations, and a few former friends or lovers that float in and out, which is weird even by my standards. It's like the ghost of Mrs. Muir at times, but he's been quiet lately, which tells me that perhaps he's evolved or has realised that he doesn't have the capacity to change anything really. It was just some kind of contract we still had that may have now been resolved now that I'm climbing back into my own isness and finding my own feet. Maybe he's realised he's not actually needed anymore. Not that I ever needed him. Even when he was alive, I didn't need all that bullshit he put me through. Trust me on that. But anyway, what am I saying here? Maybe he's just busy in the dimension where he is, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. When we finish with this life, I believe we go into another dimension in our spirit body, not our physical body, obviously. And we have work on that side of Baal too that we do. Don't know what that work might entail, but you know. Anyway, where was I? Starting to drift and getting a bit tired, people are there. Right, yes, he continues to take part in the communal life now in his spirit form. Africans, however, do not worship their spirits so much as consult them or ask them for favours or even argue with them. You've heard me argue with Davidson more than once, telling him, why are you here? You're no good to me. You're an enemy of mine. You never brought me any good into my life. You're nothing but vicious. And off I go, and he just says, Tanya la, Tanya la. Ah, well, the poor schmuck. What can you do when you don't have a body? Really? He didn't understand when he was alive. He really didn't understand. Him and his filthy, dishonouring creep friend who was a Freemason and a Kabbalist that used to sit there at Kabbalah classes and disparage and dishonour me and make foul comments about my vagina. They didn't know who the hell they were dealing with. They didn't realise that even then, when I was so brutalised, not just by them but by my former husband and former lovers, they didn't understand how powerful I was back then even. And to be fair, neither did I. I thought I was just barely dragging myself and my children through. And indeed I was. But I did it alone, dragged us through. And the price I paid for that, strength and courage and determination, was a too high price. Ultimately cost me my adult daughters love and respect because they decided to align with the abusers and, look down on me as a failure or not good enough. Evil is what it was then and still is now, but can't undo that. That's on them to grow up and grow past. But because they haven't been given the right and privilege and the immense gift of being mothers that have given birth to their own progeny, they will never understand the sacrifice and the emotional labour that a woman does, dragging her little girls through while under constant pernicious, life-threatening threats, alone. They'll never understand what it was like mentally for me and why I failed. They have no comprehension. Anyway, it doesn't matter now. Time is a great healer. Time. Some things just take time. Africans, I've just read that before, consult with the spirits, ask for favours, or even argue with them. The ghosts themselves are present in some peculiarly personal belonging or frequented place, their hut, or the log they sat on at council meetings, or the tree they rested beneath. The well-known stool huts of the Ghanaian kings are explained in these terms. The stools symbolise the soul or personality of the departed kings and are preserved for many generations. Moreover, whereas our ideas of personal life after death are often comparatively vague, the African has a firm belief in reincarnation, a belief no doubt founded on the physical resemblance of a child to his parents and grandparents. Eventually, one of the ancestors returns from the spirit world to enter the body of a newly born child. Summarizing the main tenets of African paganism, we can conclude that there is an underlying concept of a supreme being who made the world and presides over the destiny of mankind. That this world is full of spirits enshrined in natural phenomena and dead ancestors, and that there is no final death, but an active afterlife together with an eventual return to earth in a reincarnated body. Here we have a photograph of Nuba wrestlers covered themselves with ashes, partly to reduce slipperiness, but also because they believe that the ashes will give them extra vigour. The belief that ashes, like fire which created them, carry new life and strength is widespread all over the world. I'll just read this little blurb that was on this page here, written by Sir Richard Burton, The Lake Regions of Central Africa. It's titled, The Magician Must Surely Die. Fundikira, the chief of Unyamwezi, fell ill in the autumn of 1858, and, as usual, his relations were suspected of compassing his end by uchawi, or black magic. In these regions, the death of one man causes many. The Mganga witch doctor, this probably should be pronounced Mganga witch doctor, was summoned to apply the usual ordeal. After administering a mystic drug, he broke the neck of a fowl and, splitting it into 2 lengths, inspected the interior. If blackness or blemish appear about the wings, it denotes the treachery of children, relations and kinsmen. The backbone convicts the mother and grandmother. The tail shows that the criminal is the wife. The thighs, the concubines, and the injured shanks or feet, the other slaves. Having fixed upon the class of the criminals, they are collected together by the Mganga, who, after similarly dosing a second hen, throws her up into the air above the heads of the crowd and singles out the person upon whom she alights. Confession is extorted by tying the thumb backwards till it touches the wrist, or by some equally barbarous mode of question. The consequence of condemnation is certain and immediate death. The mode is chosen by the Mganga. Some are spared, others are beheaded or amazati, clubbed. A common way is to bind the cranium between 2 stiff pieces of wood, which are gradually tightened by cords until the brain bursts out from the sutures. For women, they practice a peculiarly horrible kind of impalement. These atrocities continue until the chief recovers or dies. At the commencement of his attack, in one household, 18 souls, male and female, had been destroyed. Should his illness be protracted, Scores will precede him to the grave, for the Machawi or magician must surely die. Right, we continue with reading. How long does this go for? It's quite a long chapter, people are doing. A very long chapter. And then the team may have to break it up. Right. Islam, religion of the desert. Muslims make up the second largest religious group in Africa, estimated at 97,934,000. I'm sure there'd be quite a lot more now in 2025. The majority of North Africa, which is almost wholly Mohammedan. The Arabs began their conquest of Africa in the 7th century and had wiped out almost all traces of Christianity within 100 years. Only the Coptic Church of Egypt and Ethiopia survived, small communities of Christians who were to be cut off from their brethren in the outside world for almost 10 centuries. Just 1,000 years. There is no denying the immense appeal of Islam to the nomadic people who inhabit the lonely wastelands of the Sahara. 3 million square miles of mountain ranges and sand seas. Islam originated in the desert among desert people, and its prophet Muhammad conceived its spiritual and moral code in terms of desert needs. It is an eminently practical religion, well suited to the actual conditions obtaining in Africa, where polygamy, for instance, is recognised by all unprejudiced observers as a necessary institution. By way of contrast, Christianity, with its emphasis on original sin and sexual inhibitions, is comparatively unsuited to the African temperament and life. Once North Africa had been conquered by their armies, Arab traders and merchants began their penetration of regions which even the Carthaginians and Romans had not explored. These traders were primarily after loot in the form of ivory, gold, and above all, slaves. And wherever they went, the Arab traders took with them the new religion, an absolutely uncompromising faith and fervour which left subject peoples no alternative. One was either a believer or an infidel, and this often meant, in practical terms, a choice of life or death. Millions of pagan Africans all over the continent chose to cooperate with the fierce and well-armed invaders as they were to cooperate with the Portuguese Christians during the 17th and 18th centuries. At the same time, the Muslim concept of the one God was, as we have seen, not alien to African thinking. Moreover, Quranic law, as opposed to Christian morality, did not basically conflict with tribal custom. It recognized the institution of slavery, for instance, an institution which was actually an economic necessity in non-industrial, non-mechanized societies. But Islam controlled and to some extent softened the cruel system by introducing laws regulating the treatment of slaves, concubinage, the status of the resulting children, and the rights of slaves as human beings, particularly if they chose to be converts to the true religion. The bulk of the Negro population, Jesus, the language is so outdated, but never mind. Be mindful of how outdated it is, but it's, when I say never mind, I can't do anything about it. I didn't write it. It's archaic language, but anyway. The bulk of the Negro population who suffered from the cruelty of kings and chieftains must have welcomed the new laws. Before the arrival of the Arabs, the best that a Negro captured by a rival tribe could expect was a lifetime of intolerable serfdom, or, if he was a young man, castration. The more likely fate was to have a leg chopped off and to be left to die. A number of European travellers in Central Africa scarcely 100 years ago give eyewitness accounts of this treatment of prisoners taken in tribal wars. The Arab traders, with an eye to the Mediterranean markets, considered this practice a waste of manpower, and wherever they converted people to their faith, they introduced a more humane relationship between master and slave. In addition, the Arabs, being themselves a non-industrialized people, did not upset the simple economy of Negro life by introducing the machines and paraphernalia of Western civilization. But they did bring many needed arts and crafts, which enabled the primitive tribes slowly to improve their standard of living. The results are obvious throughout Muslim Africa. Islam is a living force with strong political overtones. Once converted to the Mohammedan faith, the African can seldom be converted to Christianity, and most missionaries now openly admit that it was a waste of time to try to proselytize in Islamic countries like Morocco, Algeria, Libya, and Mauritania. Wherever Islam has had a few centuries to take root, it gives the impression of being wholly integrated into the spiritual, social, and political life of its African converts. White faith in a dark world. From about AD 100 to AD 600, the Christian church in Africa was one of the great bulwarks of the faith, a church with millions of adherents, hundreds of bishops, and an imposing list of martyrs and leaders. This powerful organisation covered the whole of northern Africa, from the mountains of Ethiopia to the shores of the Atlantic. Yet it was wiped out almost overnight, except for the Copts, by the conquest of the Arabs from the 7th century onwards. Christianity was unable to obtain a new foothold on the African continent for the next 1,000 years. Is it good or is it bad? Don't get me started. Today, The Christian Church claims a total of 68,208,509 members, of whom 29,100,000 are Roman Catholics, 17,500,000 belong to the Coptic and Eastern churches, and 21,608,509 are Protestants. The handbooks that provide these statistics warn that they should be accepted with caution, since it is almost impossible to take an exact census in many parts of Africa. Nonetheless, the figure of over 68 million adherents is an imposing one, as Christian missionaries have only been at work in Africa since about the end of the 15th century, when the Portuguese began their explorations and conquests of the Dark Continent. One of the objectives of these conquistadors was, in their own words, the exaltation of the Catholic faith, and priests invariably accompanied the armies and navies of the invaders. They had considerable success in terms of numbers, for we hear that one Jesuit priest on a short tour through the Congo in 1531 baptized 1,500 Negroes, black people, using a hose for the purpose. A number of native kings, sorry, I have to scoff at that. A number of native kings were also persuaded to divorce all their hundreds of wives save one, no doubt with disastrous results to the tribal organisation. Before we continue, I'll just read the photo here, the blurb to the photo. I'm not even sure what that is a photo of. Oh yes, I see it now, it's a crab. Right. Prediction and magic both depend on the belief that things do not happen by accident. Everything has a reason and a season, people of Earth. The pattern of the crab's movements in the bowl provides an omen of the future. But unfortunately for the success of the missionaries, the European slave traders were simultaneously busy exporting millions of Africans overseas to the New World, an estimated 100 million having been shipped out as slaves between 1441, when the trade began with the arrival of the Portuguese, until 1888, when it officially ended. The black men were not unnaturally puzzled by the assurances on the part of the missionaries that they were children of God on the one hand and slaves of white men on the other. The problem was summed up by a Jesuit priest who worked in the Congo from 1881 to 1887. The Negro saw and compared with his rude intelligence the teaching and the works, he writes. They did not coincide, while the Christian missionary proclaimed the lofty dignity of the child of God by grace. The Christian trader merely counted one more piece for his gain. However, Brave and truly Christian men like Livingstone continued with their work, and they have been followed by thousands of evangelists who have penetrated into every corner of Africa within the last 100 years. Today, through churches, chapels, mission schools, and hospitals, the African is in daily contact with Christianity in its more practical form. Spiritually, Africans tend to adapt Christian doctrine and ritual to their own temperament and way of life. The same process is noticeable in other parts of the world where Negroes, meaning black people, meet in Christian worship. Services are more lively and to some critics smack of far more ancient rites than the Christian ones. Song, dance, and religious ecstasy remind us of pagan Africa, showing how deep-seated is the old traditional religion of the forest, in my opinion, as it should be, living in harmonic resonance with the earth, people of earth. It is not surprising, therefore, that a considerable number of African Christians have broken away from the Orthodox European sects to establish churches of their own. At the latest count, there are an estimated 4,594 separate sects with a membership of 7 million scattered over 33 states. Perhaps nothing could show more forcefully how deep-rooted the ancient tribal beliefs are than these breakaway churches, for we see in their organisation and ritual definite pagan elements like prophets and prophetesses, medicine men and witch doctors, healings, in brackets, white magic, dreams and visions, divination, and so on. It's just rebranding or reframing, isn't it? Same old, same old. Nothing changes if nothing changes, people of earth. Further, these African churches are strongly asserting their Africanism as against the European missionaries' white view of the world. The names of some of these new sects clearly indicate their independence from the Western churches. Thus we have the Church of Jesus Christ on earth and its leader, the prophet Simon Kimbangu in the Congo, the Church of the Cherubim and Seraphim, and the Church of the Lord Aladura in Nigeria, and the Christian Marching Church of Central Africa, which is centred in Rhodesia, which, not long after the publication of this book, its name got changed back to Zimbabwe. I kind of like the sound of that. Christian Marching Church. They do like to march, those Christian soldiers, don't they? Sorry, it brings back flashbacks from my childhood of the Salvation Army bands that used to play at the Rotunda down near the beach where I spent many, many hours as a child. And on Sundays they would come, the Salvation Army, with their band and play all the Christian hymns, and one of them was Onward Christian Soldiers. And although already in fairly early childhood I decided that I wasn't actually a Christian and didn't really want anything much to do with it, to be honest, I must admit I did enjoy listening to the lovely music and the gusto and passion with which they played. music is music and is a connective force across all cultures and religions. People of Earth. I really should be dancing tonight. Tomorrow. Hasta mañana till we meet again. Maybe. I'll see how I feel tomorrow night. I'm ambivalent. It's not like me to be ambivalent. They really did a fucking number on me. So fuck them. The Mamatu will be out dancing. I'll have to shape up, dress up, put on makeup, put on my top hat, put on my boots and my underbust and strut my stuff, baby girls and baby boys. No one gets to grind the Mamatu down, you understand. Anyway, judging from the ritual of these breakaway sects, Christianity in Central and Southern Africa will soon have little resemblance to established religion as we know it in the West. Medicine men and witch doctors. These religious officials, who are found throughout pagan Africa, have always been popularly presented in the West as bogeymen dressed in absurd masks, feathers and animal skins, who leap about to the accompaniment of drums. They are alleged to deal in pure mumbo-jumbo in order to hoodwink the superstitious savages who are under their spell. The facts are that these priests fulfill a useful function in all primitive communities. It is true that their skills, methods, medicines and cures do not conform with modern science. But this is not the fault of the medicine men. Until European doctors arrived on the scene, the Africans had no alternative but to put their trust in those members of their tribe who had some understanding and some control of the physical and mental ills that afflicted the community. In other words, where malign spirits seemed to play so great a part in men's lives, specialists were needed to study cause and effect. And over the centuries there emerged a class of men who appeared to have some skill and some success in the prevention and cure of sickness. This was the origin and the role of the medicine man. In some cases, the medicine man has developed effective cures based on his knowledge of drugs derived from plants. From centuries of experiment and observation, he has developed a pharmacopoeia for such day-to-day needs as inducing vomiting in the case of poison, purgatives for ridding children of worms, sedatives for quietening hysterics, and potions for chest colds, headaches, whooping cough, dysentery, snakebite, swellings and stings. If his remedies were all totally ineffective, the medicine man would quickly lose his standing in the community, as a doctor would in ours. It must be admitted, however, that the medicine man also relies, for his cures, on his special brand of hocus pocus, as an examination of his little black bag would reveal. A fantastic collection of trivia, bits of bone, wooden figures, lumps of old iron, shells, beads, feathers. A great deal of the medicine man's treatment is psychological and belongs to the sphere of faith healing. Some Western observers of his methods, particularly in the case of neurotics, go so far as to say that he has as much success as our psychiatrists, if not more. All European observers agree that the African's obsession with witches is the most evil aspect of paganism. Yet the witch doctor, like the medicine man, is not at all the ogre of popular imagination. He flourishes in primitive societies because of the belief that both the spirit and the human world are peopled by two opposing forces, the good and the evil. The witch doctor is on the side of good, and his chief job is to protect the community from evil spirits and wicked men. He must always be ready to cope with mysterious events and diseases, like the death of a chieftain, sudden fevers, barrenness in women, sterility in men, mental disturbances, and all other calamities believed to be caused by witches. In such cases, I'm restraining myself, but let me just say, caused by scientists in the last 5 years. In such cases, the standard practice is to smell out the evildoer by the ancient and barbarous method of trial by ordeal. This usually consists of administering poison either to the suspects or to their animals, the degree of the resultant sickness being considered infallible evidence of guilt. To make sure there is no mistake, a confession is extorted from the accused by torture. The punishment for witches is death. Less barbarous is the witch doctor's method of predicting the future. For this purpose he has a basket crammed with odds and ends which he shakes about, selecting the topmost object and interpreting the omens from it. A white bone means happiness and laughter in the village. A piece of iron means death. A wooden figure with a black tuft on its head means the appearance of a European who will cause misfortune. For this juju, the witch doctor speaks in a falsetto voice in mimicry of a European. Before I continue with reading The Rainmaker, I'll just show you a photograph on this page which says here, in Africa, as in many other parts of the world, the craft of the smith, the controller of fire, is associated with religion and magic. Other members of the tribe are not allowed to see the tools of the smith in Cameroon, West Africa, who is also a priest. Sort of what looks like a pipe and a dagger and a bowl. I'm not sure what he's holding in his hand, some kind of implement with a little bowl attached to it, probably for burning incense or herbs of some kind. Interesting. The Rainmaker. Another important function of the witch doctor is rainmaking, which is a wholly religious activity with the Africans, as it is a wholly scientific process with us, indeed. Agriculture, the harvest, and hence life itself depend upon rainfall. If the rain does not come, the god must be placated by every means in the witch doctor's power, and elaborate ceremonies are common throughout Central Africa for this purpose. They usually follow a general pattern of singing, dancing, and praying, with the rainmaker working himself into a state of ecstasy in order to invoke the god. If his efforts are successful, he will become a great hero. If they are not, he may be accused of being a witch masquerading as a witch doctor, for here again to the primitive African, calamities like drought are always ascribed to black magic. It can easily be seen that the career of rainmaker is a dangerous one, but it is undertaken by the witch doctor as a religious duty, even when he knows that all he can really do to end a drought is to beg the god to send the rain. African rainmaking ceremonies, insofar as they depend upon mystical rites, are not radically different from those found in drought-stricken Christian countries. The liquefaction of the blood of Saint Januarius at Naples, supposed to be an omen of good rains and a bountiful harvest, is an example. We see then that the witch doctor, cruel or ridiculous though his methods may seem to us, is attempting in his way to serve the community by upholding the good and by waging war on evil. Before I continue reading, let's just show you some of these photos here. On the left we have an African, which will appear on your right, African drummer in trance. On the right, two Bushman women at a dance to cast out evil spirits, and far right, Samburu women in Kenya dancing to induce trance. Rhythmic drumming and dancing is used to induce states of trance in which spirits take possession of the performers, making a channel of communication between the normal and supernatural worlds. African drama in trance, two women in trance and working themselves into ecstatic trance states. Death, guilt and sex. The Zulu in the 19th century. My childhood friend that I bade say goodbye to his house and garden when I was 3 years old. Uncle Joe, he was a Zulu from South Africa. One superstition had a decided effect on military activity. I got chills just then. Likes to be remembered. A warrior who killed an opponent stood to develop a serious ailment, culminating in madness unless he took immediate preventive action. The first step in the cleansing process was to rip open the fallen foe's abdomen with a single slash of the assegai in order to allow the spirit to escape. The victorious warrior then had to eat and sleep apart from the other men until his cleansing was completed. This involved travel to his home kraal, but before resuming relations with his wives, he had to have intercourse with a woman not of his own kraal. This transferred the disease to her in latent form, and she in turn would pass it on to the next man to have intercourse with her. If no woman was available, the warrior could resort to sodomy. The superstition led to short campaigns, since after every battle, most of the victorious army at once decamped for home. Donald R. Morris, The Washing of the Spears. Interesting, isn't it? Rites, temples, altars, sacrifices. Primitive Africans, not knowing how to build in stone, seldom erect formal temples to their gods. As worshippers of nature, they prefer natural shrines and the sacred grove is universally venerated as the abode of spirits. Thank you, Papa Legba. Sorry, just almost slammed me in my back. Just this wave of energy. A typical sacred grove may contain a pool, serpents, a phallic-shaped stone, or a hut which houses clay figures representing tribal gods and ancestors. To these shrines, the worshippers bring their offerings of eggs, cowrie shells, little scraps of cloth, and even empty bottles. The idea of the sacred grove is, of course, one of the most ancient and fundamental elements of all primitive religion. There are many curious customs connected with pregnancy and childbirth among the African tribes, since primitive peoples have never understood the physiological processes involved. The phenomenon of birth is, therefore, a mystical event surrounded by special rites and taboos. For instance, we find in Central Africa the taboo about seeing a pregnant woman up a tree. In such a case, a man is expected to shoot the unfortunate woman. Elsewhere it is taboo for a pregnant woman to sit on a rock, since this will prolong her labour. Many women bear their children while working in the fields. Difficult deliveries are abnormal, though European doctors report that Negro women bleed worse the nearer their diet comes to that of the white man. On the occasion of their delivery, African women have no desire for the presence of their husband, since the child will be ashamed to be born if a man is present. When a girl baby is born, the umbilical cord is cut by a hoe, meaning an actual hoe, as in garden implement people there. I know, I couldn't help myself. I can be an arsehole sometimes, I admit. The umbilical cord is cut by a hoe to ensure that the female will be a good field worker. So it's a form of sympathetic magic. The cord of a boy is cut with an arrow to make him a good hunter. So that makes logical, coherent sense. Marriage is a social contract without any particular religious associations. Prospective husbands are usually more interested in a woman's fertility than in her virginity. Since the African's attitudes towards sex are relatively simple, and he has few of the obsessions or inhibitions of civilized men in this respect. The African does not make the sharp distinction between life and death that we do. Death is merely another change in status. The deceased is not dead in our sense. He remains a very real presence in the community, continuing to benefit the living by his wisdom and advice. The soul returns to that reservoir of power which we have called the Supreme Being, the multiverse. His body passes as a ghost to that other world, which is common to all African pagan religions. He must therefore be provided for in death as in life. Hence, he is buried with solemn rites and interred with the necessities of existence: food, clothes, cooking pots, and, in the case of the kings and chiefs in olden days, with wives and slaves who were sacrificed for the occasion. It is reliably recorded that at the death of an Ashanti queen in 1816, more than 3,500 slaves were murdered in her honour. Cases of human sacrifice on the occasion of a king's death are no longer known in Africa today. Let me just one moment, I need to plug in my phone, batteries nearly dead. Right, here we go. Initiation ceremonies. The purpose of initiation customs, most of which are extremely severe, is to promote unity, cooperation and conformity to the life and law of the tribe. The most typical of them, and one that is almost universal throughout Africa, is circumcision. Nearly all African boys and large numbers of the girls undergo this mutilation, which is regarded as more of a religious ordeal than a surgical operation. The incidence of death as a result of clumsy methods, dirty knives, and post-operative severity is considered as evidence of the religious nature of the rite. The initiation is directed by the village elders and administered by the medicine man. The boys aged between 10 and 17 are sent away from the village into a special camp which they are not allowed to leave for as long as 6 months. During that time, they are considered to be on probation. In fact, they are treated much as young criminals were treated in the bad old days in European prisons, half-starved, whipped for the most trifling offences, crowded into pens, and not allowed to wash until the long ordeal is terminated. These boys, once circumcised, swear blood brotherhood with each other. Those who survive the initiation emerge as full adult members of the tribe with all the rights and privileges of the elders, including the right to marry. A number of tribes also practice a similar rite on girls, who are taken to a camp where they undergo clitoridectomy as proof, if they survive, that they are adults and entitled to begin new lives as wives and mothers. Left. Animals have been important in the African approach to the supernatural since the animal gods of ancient Egypt. An anteater and an elephant appear on these ceremonial staffs, held by the orators or spokesmen of native chiefs in Ghana. I can make out the anteater, beautifully carved. The elephants. Ah yes, there he is. A bit hard to kind of see. And right, young masked girls in Basuto land taking part in pagan initiation ceremonies. These ordeals are sometimes so severe that they cause serious injury or death. And again, in very shamanic symbology, their faces are covered by beaded type veils. Secret societies. For the African, membership in a secret society begins at the very outset of his initiation into the tribe with the long circumcision ordeal shared with his companions. From the moment he returns from the camp to his village, the young Negro, that should say black man, is involved in secret activities of one kind or another for the remainder of his life. The principal secret societies seem to be directly related to pagan beliefs in spirits, witchcraft, and cannibalism. Typical are the West African leopard societies, whose members are supposed to transform themselves into the most feared animal of the forest, and, like the leopard, they claw their victims to death and devour parts of them. European administrators made many attempts to root out leopard men, usually unsuccessfully. Probably the most widespread and socially accepted secret organisations are those of self-appointed vigilantes engaged in the perpetual war against witches. Nigeria is the home of a secret witch-hunting society which has a curious resemblance to the Ku Klux Klan of the United States. The witch hunters wear tall conical headcloths to mask their human features and descend on villages at night to root out suspected witches. Governments in Africa do not approve of secret societies, but are powerless to suppress them. They are, on the one hand, an integral part of social life, and on the other, a powerful political force. The importance of such secret societies throughout Africa is typified in the Mau Mau organisation of the Kikuyu in Kenya. They were utterly terrifying, the Mau Mau. We even heard about them when I was growing up in New Zealand. The distinction between white, good, and black, evil magic is clear throughout Africa. The former is helpful and protective and falls within the sphere of the medicine man who prepares healing potions and of the witch doctor who wages war on witches. The latter is the monopoly of wizards and sorcerers. White magic tackles the problems of disease, both physical and mental, of accidents and misfortunes, and of natural disasters like drought. It works in the open, and the light of day clearly always entails a public ceremony. Black magic is black because the practitioner, man or woman, works in the dark. Africans have not the slightest doubt that the evil charms, spells, and methods of these wicked people are effective and even lethal. Sudden death from sheer terror is not unknown in cases where a man discovers an evil fetish like a cracked bone secreted by a wizard in his house, or sees a trail of powder laid around his hut, or finds a clay image of himself pinned down with pegs and pierced with thorns in the head and heart. The psychological effect of such methods is not hard to assess. For where such evil objects are being used against a man, obviously the intention is evil, and he is therefore in grave danger. Whatever else has changed on the continent of Africa, the deep-rooted belief in magic, both white and black, has not. And no one can say how many innocent men and women have been terrified, tortured, or even murdered as a result of the Africans' obsession with witchcraft. Before we continue reading the next offering, I'll just read this blurb down the bottom. Magic, lightning, and failure. In most cases, magic does not attempt the impossible. Rain magicians do not make rain in the dry season, and magic against thieves is made against unknown persons, not named persons. Hence there will be many successes which are remembered. The failures can be interpreted within the system by invoking other beliefs. Every year before the trade winds bring their rains, Zulus call in special magicians to treat their villages against lightning. Most villages are not struck, but if a man's village is struck, he will say the magician was bad, his medicines were poor, a taboo was broken, a witch wielded the lightning, or heaven itself was powerfully determined to strike the village. We reason similarly. If your house, which you have protected with lightning conductors, is nevertheless struck, you may say that the workman was bad, the wires poor, a rule of craft and installation was broken, the charge was too strong. You do not rush to the Royal Society to deny the validity of scientific theory. The total system of beliefs thus allows for a good deal of failure. Max Gluckman, Custom and Conflict in Africa. Witches, the continuing fear. Africans base their fear of witches on the argument that somebody, some person or spirit has to be responsible for the inexplicable. Why, for instance, should one man be struck down by lightning and another spared? Especially if the dead man is a good hunter, a loving husband, a kind father. We call such a happening coincidence. The Africans call it witchcraft, for witches, although they are mortal, have supernatural powers which they invariably use to harm, never to benefit their neighbours. A few of them are men, wizards or warlocks, but the majority are women, though not necessarily the poor old crones of Western tradition. An African witch can be young because her evil powers and activities have nothing to do with her age or appearance. In fact, there is not much she can do about her inherent wickedness, though, if she is lucky, her supernatural powers will be quiescent, and she will be able to live a normal life as a member of her community. But if she is an active witch, she will be bound to use her evil powers until she is caught by the witch doctor. A witch invariably practices her activities at night, at which time she leaves her body and flies off, sometimes as a ball of fire, sometimes as a night bird, to the tops of trees or a secret grove where witches convene for their nocturnal orgies. Wait a minute here. Just wait one moment here. Must be doing it all wrong. Oh, never mind. These orgies take the form of cannibalism. Well, I wouldn't enjoy that anyway, so I'm not missing much, people of Earth. For witches feed on human flesh and are especially partial to the meat of babies and young children. Yuck. The flesh-eating, however, seems to be regarded by many Africans as a mystical rite, a devouring of the soul of the victim, whence the slow withering away of his actual body. The witch doctor must therefore hasten to identify the witch responsible before she figuratively consumes a vital organ like the heart, lungs, or liver. Consequently, if he catches the witch and proves her guilt by the various magical tests employed, trial by ordeal, a quick confession is extorted from her by torture. She is then summarily disposed of. These ideas of witches and witchcraft are so deeply implanted in the African mind that not even the impact of urbanization education and technological changes has affected the basic convictions. All Christian missionaries admit that these beliefs constitute the greatest obstacle to genuine conversion. But before witchcraft can be eradicated from Africa, somebody has to explain to the unsophisticated native why some innocent person should be singled out for misfortune. Neither God nor the good spirits would do such a cruel and unjust thing. Therefore the act must have been the work of an evil power in the person of a witch or a sorcerer. Medicines, charms and fetishes. African medicines are of two kinds. Straightforward potions distilled from plants and roots, prescribed in much the same spirit as Western medicines, and drugs are prescribed for simple ailments, and magical potions or powders concocted from weird ingredients and prescribed for more difficult cases. Examples of the latter potions are the various concoctions used for warding off evil spirits or giving a man protection from his enemies. From northern Nigeria comes the secret formula. Cut off the head of a snake and in it plant the seed of the swamp dock. Bury the head in a grave which must be 7 days old. Pour water on it for 3 consecutive nights. When the plant has grown to the height of 3 or 4 feet, go again to the graveyard and strip naked. Pull up the swamp dock and use it as a girdle. If anyone attempts to attack you, the girdle will become a snake. It will bite your enemy. We can see from this formula that medicine in Africa is more magic than science. Knowing nothing of bacteriology, the medicine man relies to a great extent on psychology and faith, hence the hundreds of spells and charms, one for almost every contingency. Barrenness is supposedly cured by all manner of jujus, pregnancies safeguarded by others. Men wear antelope horns, animal teeth, gourds, knives, iron bracelets, and leather pouches. Both sexes in primitive Africa are often mutilated on the face or body as part of this all-pervasive charm cult. Mutilations, bizarre to Western eyes, take the form of scars, filing down of teeth, extending the lips or ears with discs or rings, and plugging the nostrils. The more bizarre of these mutilations are seen less and less as Africans adopt the outward trappings of Western culture, including our clothes. But the individual still puts his trust in his favourite juju, which he will continue to wear in secret, even when he has left his village in the forest for one of the large modern African cities. Underlying myths. Together with all religions, paganism has a collection of myths to explain the creation of the world and the fall of man. While each tribe has its own account, the basic theme is nearly always the same, not unlike the Hebrew version as told in the first chapter of Genesis. God is said to have made man and woman from clay. These two mortals lived for a time in paradise, from which they were expelled due to some original sin. A Nigerian legend blames the woman for annoying God by striking the sky with her pounding stick. A Congolese story says that her continual nagging became so intolerable that God lowered her down from heaven in a basket. Whatever the reason for the expulsion from paradise, man was alienated from God, who, in most African myths, retires into his own domain, where he grows older and it appears more maudlin. For according to some, his old eyes dribble with tears, which become the rain that falls upon the earth below. According to others, he spends a great deal of time quarrelling with his wife. Claps of thunder are the great God shouting. The underlying notion of nearly all African creation myths seems to be that God and man once lived on earth and conversed together. Then man, or more frequently woman, erred, and a fall resulted. Ever since then, men have tried to climb back into heaven and have even built towers and ladders for that purpose, but without success. Consequently, when Christian missionaries arrived in Africa with the news that man could be saved through Jesus Christ, the appeal of the new religion was enormous, since no African myth explained how man was to ascend into paradise. See also numerous articles on individual African tribes and ceremonies. James Wellard. Further reading. The following are available in most large public libraries. They provide a good introduction to African religion and have extensive bibliographies. Darrell Ford edition, African Worlds, International African Institute, 1954. G.P. Murdoch, Africa, Its People and Their Culture History, McGraw-Hill, 1959. Jeffrey Parender, African Traditional Religion, SPCK, 1962. Edwin W. Smith edition, I think they might mean editor, sorry. African Ideas of God, Friendship Press, 1950. And James Wellard, Lost Worlds of Africa, published by Dutton, 1967. Possessed by gods and devils. Above left. You man of Ghana in trance cuts himself without loss of blood to demonstrate the power of the war god who has possessed him. The one on the right, Ubungi, medicine man beating a sick girl to drive out devils. Her back is daubed with herbs and warm water. The belief that all diseases are caused by evil spirits which have taken possession of the patient's body is found all over the world. In Africa, a great deal of the medicine man's treatment is psychological and belongs to the sphere of faith healing. Some Western observers of his methods, particularly in the case of neurotics, go so far as to say that he has as much success as our psychiatrists. Facing page. above, a Nigerian child and a couple in trance, believing themselves to be possessed by the Holy Ghost, and below, Zar priestess in Egypt. The priestess goes into trance to expel certain evil spirits called Zars from her flock. Here's the Nigerian child and couple in trance. And here's the Zar priestess, looking rather, I must say, rather sinister and a bit frightening, to be honest. I guess it's just because the way the photograph's taken, half her face in shadow, half in light, and the black eye makeup she's got around her eyes, and yeah. Anyway, so we'll finish there with 2 hours and 20 minutes in, and tomorrow I will continue with Afro-American law, agriculture, and Agrippa, which are much shorter little pieces of writing. And on we go, and on we go. Blessed be, people of earth, and stay well, stay free, stay safe, stay happy, rejoice in all your small or great successes and all your undertakings. I need to rest after my big week of hyperactivity accomplishments, and I'm content with my lot, but I'm actually exhausted. I've been exhausted all day, so it is what it is. And anyway, I bid you good evening. The time is now 9:58 p.m. on the 22nd of May 2025, and perhaps I'll come back tomorrow and read to you again. If not, it'll be the following day. Tomorrow's Friday. So we'll see how I travel through, all my little quests and accomplishments. Hopefully, if I'm not too tired tomorrow, I might have a go at soldering those little gold embellishments on my cuff so that I can complete it and then set the stone and wear it. So, but it may not get done tomorrow, but it'll get done soon. I'm very close to completing it. I'm very excited about that. So, I bid you all good night and adieu.